JD Vance destroys The View. Sparks fly, live on air. The cameras blinked red. The audience fell into a hush. JD Vance, Vice President of the United States, stepped onto the polished studio floor of The View. It wasn't just another daytime segment, it was an ambush disguised as a conversation. Sunny Hostin glanced at her cue cards. Joy Behar crossed her legs with exaggerated calm. Whoopi Goldberg adjusted her chair eyes, narrowed behind her glasses. They were ready, but so was he. JD Vance didn't walk like a politician. No hand-waving, no smiles for the audience. He took his seat with quiet gravity, his posture composed, his expression unreadable. He wasn't here to pander. He was here for something else. Something sharper. Whoopi opened. Vice President Vance, welcome. Let's get right to it. The air tensed. Joy chimed in, smiling. You've been very vocal about media accountability. Some would say a little too vocal. Vance didn't flinch. Accountability isn't optional when the stakes are national trust, he replied, his voice even. Sunny tilted her head. You've said journalists push agendas. Are you suggesting we're not telling the truth? The trap was set. Vance leaned forward just slightly. I'm suggesting that narrative sometimes outweighs fact, and that's dangerous, especially from platforms that reach millions. The temperature shifted. The co-hosts stiffened. The studio lights buzzed. Vance didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He stated, flatly, like a scalpel cutting cloth. The audience didn't know whether to clap or recoil. They watched. Whoopi pressed. So you think this show us we're part of the problem a beat? Vance held her gaze. I think the American public deserves truth more than they deserve comfort. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a sentence. Silence. Then Joy laughed nervously. You say that like you're the only one holding the truth. No, Vance said calmly. I'm saying the truth should belong to everyone, not just the loudest voice in the room. Sunny's tone sharpened. You were part of an administration that called the press the enemy. And now you claim to care about truth. Vance nodded slowly. I care about integrity, and I care about the American people not being lied to no matter who's doing the lying. A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras caught everything. It was only the first segment, and JD Vance had already changed the energy in the room. The red light blinked back on. The commercial break was over, but nobody in the studio had truly taken a break. JD Vance sat still, hands clasped. His composure was a weapon. The hosts, meanwhile, huddled in quick whispers, trying to recalibrate. The second round began. Joy Behar jumped in fast. Mr. Vice President, let's stop pretending. You've worked in one of the most controversial administrations in modern history. Do you seriously expect us to believe you're here out of concern for truth and not damage control? JD turned to her eyes steady. What I expect is irrelevant. What matters is whether what I'm saying is true. And if it is, it doesn't matter which administration I served under. The studio tightened. Whoopi folded her hands. But it does matter. You were part of the engine that called the press the enemy that spread doubt like wildfire. And yet JD replied, here I am on your platform, ready to talk, ready to be challenged. Isn't that the democratic ideal? Sunny Hostin narrowed her eyes. But what are you really doing here, Mr. Vice President? Trying to rehabilitate your image, or are you pushing something bigger? JD's voice didn't rise, but it cut clean. I'm here because too many people in power, including in this studio, think it's acceptable to shape reality instead of reflect it. That ends today, the crowd murmured. Joy smirked. That's bold, coming from someone who stood silently through 4 years of alternative facts. JD turned to face her directly. You think I was silent? You weren't listening. You only hear when someone fits the role you expect. And when they don't, you silence them with a narrative. Sunny leaned in. What narrative is that exactly? That conservatives don't care about truth? That if someone defends their side, they're automatically corrupt? It's lazy thinking, and it's broken our trust. Whoopi raised a hand. Let's not conflate criticism with censorship. We call out what we see. That's our job. Then do it fairly, JD replied. Call it out on all sides. You're not referees if you only throw flags at one team. The audience buzzed again. The tension was climbing, not hostile, but electric. Joy crossed her arms. So you think we're biased? that we're the ones poisoning the well. JD answered without hesitation. Bias isn't the problem. It's pretending you don't have it that undermines your message. Be transparent, and the people will trust you more. Sonny's voice rose slightly. We're journalists, not activists. Then why do so many Americans feel otherwise? JD asked. That question should haunt every newsroom in this country. For the first time, none of the hosts responded immediately. JD continued. You want to talk about responsibility. Let's talk about how millions of people tuned out because they stopped believing they'd ever get the full story. That didn't start in Washington. It started in studios like this. Whoopi Goldberg sat back, her voice measured. You're asking us to accept blame for everything that's gone wrong. No, JD said calmly. Just for the part you played, like I accept mine. That's what leadership looks like. It was a challenge, and it landed hard. Joy's tone turned sharp. You're framing yourself as a truth teller, but you still defend policies that tore people apart. I don't defend all policies, JD said firmly. I defend principles. And the principle of truth of holding every institution to the same standard that's not partisan. That's American. There was a shift in the audience. It wasn't loud, but it was real. A pause in judgment, a moment of reflection. Whoopi's jaw tightened. So what's the solution, Mr. Vice President? Tear down the press or silence criticism? JD shook his head. No, shine brighter lights, ask harder questions, not just to guests you disagree with, but to each other. Start there. Sonny sat up straight. You're not afraid to say this here, are you? I came to say it here on purpose. JD answered, because if we can't speak truth in this room, then where can we? The crowd was fully with him now, not in cheering, but in listening, in processing. JD Vance wasn't just reacting. He was reshaping the narrative inch by inch, word by word. The host had hoped to control the frame, but JD had grabbed the camera, and he wasn't letting go. The cameras rolled. The interview wasn't slowing down, it was accelerating. JD Vance leaned back slightly, not retreating, but settling in like a man who knew he was exactly where he needed to be. Sonny adjusted her mic. Vice President, let's not pretend your administration didn't sow distrust in the media. How do you justify standing here today preaching about responsibility? JD didn't blink. I'm not preaching. I'm offering a standard, one I believe everyone, politicians, journalists, voters should be held to. Joy snapped. You mean your standard? JD answered without pause. No, the American standard, truth over narrative, accountability over convenience. Whoopi chuckled dryly. That sounds rehearsed. It's not, JD said calmly. It's just rarely said out loud. There was a beat of hesitation in the room. The hosts weren't used to a guest who didn't dodge, didn't soften, didn't flatter. Sonny pressed again. You still haven't acknowledged the real damage caused by the Trump years. The division, the hate. Do you think media was innocent in that division? JD interrupted. The room went quiet. I'm not asking you to defend Trump. I'm asking you to recognize that polarization is a two-way street. Politicians light the fire, but media fans the flames. Whoopi leaned forward. So now this is our fault. I didn't say that, JD said. But if you claim to hold others accountable, you need to hold yourselves accountable too. Or it's just theater. The crowd stirred. That line landed hard. Joy muttered, You're quite the performer yourself, Mr. Vice President. JD smiled faintly. Then I suppose I'm on the right stage. Sonny tried again. Why don't you tell us then? What's your vision for how the media should operate? JD's tone shifted firmer, slower. Inform, not inflame. Ask questions, don't just confirm biases. Challenge everyone equally, regardless of their party, their power, or their platform. You mean challenge your side too? Whoopi asked. Yes, JD replied. Especially my side. That surprised them. For the first time, the hosts hesitated. He continued. We have to be willing to lose political points to gain public trust. That applies to every newsroom and to every elected office. The audience was now fully engaged, phones were out, eyes wide. Some hosts glanced toward the producers. This wasn't going how they had planned. Joy exhaled. So what you want a media that's just neutral and boring? I want a media that's honest. Honest even when it hurts, especially then. The moment hung. JD leaned slightly forward again, voice calm but charged. People are tuning out not because they don't care, but because they don't trust you. And that should scare everyone in this room. Whoopi narrowed her eyes. You sound like you're here to lecture. I'm here to talk, JD replied. Something we used to do without turning everything into war. The hosts grew still. For a moment, none of them knew what to say. Sonny finally muttered, and you think you're winning right now? JD smiled, not cocky but clear. It's not about winning, it's about waking up. The next segment began with Whoopi straightening her notes, trying to steady the ship. The momentum had swung dangerously in JD Vance's favor, and the co-hosts could feel it, but they weren't ready to back down. So let's talk about policy, Mr. Vice President Whoopi said, cutting into the silence. You stood by policies that targeted immigrants, hurt minority communities, and divided the nation. Are you proud of that legacy? JD Vance exhaled slowly. I'm proud of standing for national security, for economic fairness, and for calling out broken systems. I'm not proud of every mistake, but I won't apologize for prioritizing American interests. Joy's tone sharpened. You say American interests like it's code. For exclusion, for fear. No, JD countered its clarity. We can't help anyone if we can't help ourselves. That's not fear. That's foundation. Sonny jumped in. You call for unity, but supported the most divisive president in modern history. Unity isn't silence, JD said. Sometimes you unite people by telling them what no one else will. Truth is uncomfortable, but it brings people together more than lies ever will. The room stilled. Whoopi leaned forward. You keep invoking truth like it's some holy grail. What makes your version any different? JD's voice dropped to a deliberate calm. It's not mine. That's the point. Truth doesn't belong to any party, any platform, or any host. It belongs to the people. And they know when they're being fed spin. A smattering of applause broke out. The studio's energy flickered. The hosts noticed. Joy tried to interrupt, but JD wasn't done. You think you're holding me accountable? He asked, tone steady. I welcome it. But where's the accountability for you? When you push narratives that turn out false, where's the correction? Where's the humility? Sonny's brows tightened. You're accusing us of being dishonest? I'm accusing the industry of being selective. JD said, and selective truth is the same as a lie. There it was, clear, cold, cutting. The audience buzzed louder. The crew exchanged glances. Whoopi's voice rose. You're deflecting. This isn't about us. This is about your record. My record's public, JD said, but yours is protected by tone, by editing, by audience filtering. People don't just distrust media because of politics. They distrust it because they see the game. Joy scoffed. So you're just a savior now? No, JD said, turning slightly toward her. I'm just not afraid to say what a lot of Americans are already thinking. There was another moment of silence. It was heavier this time. Sonny broke it. Do you really believe what you're saying? Or is this just strategy? JD's reply came sharp. If it were strategy, I'd flatter you. If it were strategy, I'd avoid this show altogether. I'm here because I believe in confrontation with civility. And this country desperately needs more of both. That hit deep. The co-hosts shifted. They weren't losing control, but they weren't in control anymore either. Whoopi, voice lower, asked, So what's next? Tear it all down? No, JD said. Build it honestly. Stop the theater. Stop the tribalism. Let Americans trust again by showing them you don't have anything to hide. Joy folded her arms. We don't. JD raised an eyebrow. Then prove it. Start tomorrow with an apology segment. Highlight 3 stories you got wrong. Let your viewers see that even here there's humility. The audience erupted. First laughter, then applause. It was half joke, half dare, but it landed hard. Whoopi looked away. Sonny stared at her notes. Joy pursed her lips. JD Vance had turned their house into his pulpit. But he wasn't preaching. He was holding a mirror. And no one likes how truth looks under fluorescent lights. The studio lights dimmed slightly for dramatic effect. A producer gave the signal, another segment live. Whoopi's expression was firm now, no longer hiding her irritation. Joy was silent, arms crossed. Sonny was scribbling notes furiously. But JD Vance calm. Still. Watching. Vice President Vance Whoopi began. You've said a lot about media responsibility, but when does personal responsibility come in? What about your role in amplifying a president who encouraged division, JD? Vance nodded. That's a fair question. My role was never to echo anyone blindly. I offered what I believed were necessary truths, especially when uncomfortable. Joy interrupted. Truth. Let's talk about Charlottesville. The comments about very fine people. That wasn't truth. That was a disgrace. JD leaned forward. And I said then, and I say now, it was a moment of poor communication. But one phrase doesn't define an entire presidency, just like one episode doesn't define this show. That stung. The audience murmured again. Sonny jumped in. But you're defending rhetoric that hurt real people. That stirred hate. JD responded quietly. And I've condemned hate repeatedly. But calling someone hateful without nuance is easy. Fixing the country takes more than sound bites. Whoopi folded her hands. So what are you offering today? Rewrites redemption, I'm offering reflection, JD said. And maybe a challenge to you and to your viewers. Joy scoffed. You think you're brave for showing up? No, JD replied. Bravery would be inviting someone you disagree with and listening without waiting to pounce. That silenced the panel momentarily. He continued. It's not just about right or left. It's about a country that doesn't know who to trust. And the people on this stage have more influence than most politicians. Sonny's voice lowered. So now it's our fault the country's divided? No. But you shape the climate. If every guest becomes a fight, what are you modeling? If you never admit error, what example are you setting? A pause. JD Vance was drawing blood now, but with a surgeon's hand. Whoopi tried to change direction. Let's talk about immigration. You've backed strong borders. Critics say it's xenophobic. Secure borders aren't xenophobic, JD said. They're foundational. Every country has the right to know who's coming in. That's not hate, it's policy. Joy fired back. But kids in cages, families separated policy with flaws, JD said, which we worked to fix. But oversimplifying it as cruelty is itself a political tactic. The audience's reactions were growing more complex. Not cheers, not boos, just intensity. Sonny leaned in. Let's go deeper. You've said the justice system is broken. But you defend people investigated for serious crimes. Because justice must be blind, JD said. Investigations don't equal guilt. And selective outrage erodes our institutions. Whoopi raised her voice. So you're saying investigations into Trump were all biased. I'm saying bias existed and ignoring it is dangerous. Ask questions. That's the job, isn't it? This time some audience members clapped. JD didn't acknowledge it. He kept his eyes on the host. Joy leaned forward. You talk like the victim, but you had power. Real power. Why didn't you do more to fix it? Then I tried, JD said, and I'm still trying. Coming here isn't for optics. It's because I believe Americans deserve to hear both praise and critique of the systems that shape them. The room settled. Sonny asked, So what do you want us to do? Start small. JD said, Say you don't know when you don't. Admit when coverage was unfair. Feature voices you disagree with, not just to argue, but to learn. The words didn't feel like a lecture. They felt like a dare. Whoopi paused. That sounds noble. But is it realistic? Nothing worth doing ever starts as easy, JD said. This conversation, it's hard, but we're having it. That matters. Joy looked away. Sonny exhaled. Even Whoopi softened slightly. JD Vance had come into the lion's den and made the lions reflect. The final segment began not with a fiery question, but a moment of stillness. For a second, the studio lights felt warmer, the tension looser, but only slightly. The audience leaned in. Everyone knew this was the last round. Whoopi broke the silence. Mr. Vice President, she said, tone softer. Now you've raised big issues, bias, power, truth. But where does this conversation go from here? JD Vance didn't hesitate. It goes to honesty. Not just in what we say, but in what we choose to cover. Not just in debates, but in silences. Especially the silences. Joy arched an eyebrow. You're saying we're silent? I'm saying JD replied that silence on hard truths is louder than any headline. And the people notice. They always notice. Sonny leaned forward. Give us an example. Something you think we've ignored. JD's voice stayed calm. Stories about crime waves in major cities. Coverage of border crises only when it serves a narrative. Selective attention. It's not what's said, it's what's left unsaid. The audience shifted, considering. Whoopi responded carefully. Some of that is editorial choice, not necessarily bias, and some of it is fear, JD said. Fear of being called the wrong name, of offending the wrong group. But journalism isn't safe, it shouldn't be. Joy looked skeptical. You want chaos in the newsroom? No, JD said. I want courage. The courage to ask even when the answers don't align with your expectations. Sunny tapped her pen. You're idealizing something messy. Media is complicated. So is democracy, JD answered. But we don't lower the bar because it's hard. That landed. Quiet agreement fluttered across some faces in the crowd. Whoopi looked around the table, then back at JD. So where does that leave us? You've called us out. You've challenged our credibility. What's next? JD paused. Next, I'd ask this show and others like it to lead, not just in ratings, but in responsibility. Bring on guests you fear will challenge you. Invite truth even when it stings. Joy's lips tightened. And if we already think we're doing that, then prove it, JD said. Let your audience judge. A moment of charged silence passed. Sunny's voice softened. You came in here expecting a fight. No, JD replied. I came here ready for one, but I was hoping for a conversation. The honesty in his tone shifted something. Even Whoopi sat back, letting the weight of that truth settle. JD continued. The media isn't the enemy, but it's not immune. And the moment it stops asking, what if we're wrong, it loses the public. Joy crossed her arms. You say that like you've never made mistakes. I have, JD said. Plenty. But I don't hide them behind applause or algorithms. I face them. And that's all I ask from anyone in this room. Another beat. Then Sunny said quietly, so this was never about defense. It was a reckoning. JD nodded. For all of us. The segment's countdown began. 10 seconds left. Whoopi, voice thoughtful, leaned in one last time. Any final words? JD looked around. At the audience, at the cameras, then back to the hosts. Yes. Keep the lights on, not just the cameras. The truth shouldn't fear exposure. The red light blinked off. The studio froze in a rare silence, and in that quiet, JD Vance had the final word.